The expression idle talk is not to be used here in a disparaging sense. Terminologically, it means a positive phenomenon which constitutes the mode of being of the understanding and interpretation of everyday Dasein. For the most part, discourse expresses itself and has always already expressed itself. It is language, but then understanding and interpretation are always already contained in what is expressed Ausgesprochenheit. As expression, language harbors in itself an interpretedness of the understanding of Dasein. This interpretedness is no more merely objectively present than language is, but rather its being is itself of the character of Dasein. Dasein is initially, and in certain limits, constantly entrusted to this interpretedness that directs and apportions the possibilities of the average understanding and the attunement belonging to it. In the totality of its structured context of signification, expression preserves an understanding of the disclosed world, and thus equiprimordially an understanding of the Dasein with of others and of one's own being. The intelligibility already deposited in expression pertains to the discoveredness of beings actually obtained and handed down, as of the current intelligibility of being, and of the possibilities and horizons available for fresh interpretation and conceptual articulation. But above and beyond a mere reference to the fact of this interpretedness of Dasein, we must now ask about the existential mode of being of the discourse which is expressed and expressing itself. If it cannot be conceived as something objectively present, what is its being, and what does this being say in principle about the everyday mode of being of Dasein? Discourse expressing itself is communication. Its tendency of being aims at bringing the hearer to participate in disclosed being toward what is talked about in discourse. In the language that is spoken when one expresses oneself, there already lies an average intelligibility, and, in accordance with this intelligibility, the discourse communicated can be understood, to a large extent, without the listener coming to a being toward what is talked about in the discourse so as to have a primordial understanding of it. One understands not so much the beings talked about, rather, one already only listens to what is spoken about as such. This is understood. What is talked about is understood only approximately and superficially. One means the same thing because it is in the same averageness that we have in common understanding of what is said. Hearing and understanding have attached themselves beforehand to what is spoken about as such. Communication does not impart the primary relation of being to the being spoken about, but being with one another takes place in talking with one another and in heeding what is spoken about. What is important to it is that one speaks. The being said, the saying, and the pronouncement provide a guarantee for the genuineness and appropriateness of the discourse and the understanding belonging to it. And since this discoursing has lost the primary relation of being sane to the being sayed and talked about, or else never achieved it, it does not communicate in the mode of a primordial appropriation of this being, but communicates by gossiping and passing the word along. What is spoken about as such spreads in wider circles and takes on an authoritative character. Things are so because one says so. Idle talk is constituted in this gossiping and passing the word along, a process by which its initial lack of grounds to stand on increases to complete groundlessness bodenlosigkeit. And this is not limited to vocal gossip, but spreads to what is written as scribbling. In this latter case, gossiping is based not so much on hearsay. It feeds on sporadic superficial reading. The average understanding of the reader will never be able to decide what has been drawn from primordial sources with a struggle, and how much is just gossip. Moreover, the average understanding will not even want such a distinction, will not have need of it, since, after all, it understands everything. The groundlessness of idle talk is no obstacle to its being public, but encourages it. Idle talk is the possibility of understanding everything without any previous appropriation of the matter. Idle talk already guards against the danger of getting stranded in such an appropriation. Idle talk, which everyone can snatch up, not only divests us of the task of genuine understanding, but develops an indifferent intelligibility for which nothing is closed off any longer. Discourse, which belongs to the essential constitution of the being of Dasein, and also constitutes its disclosedness, has the possibility of becoming idle talk, and as such of not really keeping being enthralled open in an articulated understanding, but of closing it off and covering over inner-worldly being. To do this, one need not aim to deceive. Idle talk does not have the kind of being of consciously passing off something as something else. The fact that one has said something groundlessly, and then passes it along in further retelling, is sufficient to turn disclosing around into a closing off. For what is said is initially always understood as saying, that is, as discovering. Thus, by its very nature, idle talk is a closing off since it omits going back to the foundation of what is being talked about. This closing off is aggravated anew by the fact that idle talk, in which an understanding of what is being talked about is supposedly reached, holds any new questioning and discussion at a distance because it presumes it has understood, and in a peculiar way it suppresses them and holds them back. This interpretedness of idle talk has always already settled itself down in Dasein. We get to know many things initially in this way, and some things never get beyond such an average understanding. Dasein can never escape the everyday way of being interpreted, into which Dasein has grown initially. All genuine understanding, interpreting and communication, rediscovery and new appropriation come about in it, out of it, and against it. It is not the case that a Dasein, untouched and unseduced by this way of interpreting, was ever confronted by the free land of a world, so that it just looks at what it encounters. The domination of the public way in which things have been interpreted has already decided upon even the possibilities of being attuned, that is, about the basic way in which Dasein lets itself be affected by the world. They prescribes that attunement, it determines what and how one sees. Idle talk, which closes off in the way we described, is the mode of being of the uprooted understanding of Dasein. However, it does not occur as the objectively present condition of something objectively present, but it is existentially uprooted, and this uprooting is constant. Ontologically, this means that when Dasein maintains itself in idle talk, it is, as being in the world, cut off from the primary and primordially genuine relations of being toward the world, toward Dasein with, toward being in itself. It keeps itself in suspension, and yet in doing so it is still always together with the world, with others, and toward itself. Only a being whose disclosedness is constituted by attuned and understanding discourse, that is, who in this ontological constitution is its there, who is in the world, has the possibility of being of such uprooting which, far from constituting a non-being of Dasein, rather constitutes its most everyday and stubborn reality. However, it is in the nature of the obviousness and self-assurance of the average way of being interpreted that under its protection, the uncanniness of the suspension in which Dasein can drift toward an increasing groundlessness remains, concealed to actual Dasein itself.